Alyssa, it's great to have you here.
I'm jazzed to be here with you.
I know that you've met my wife a couple times.
I have.
And she came back a few weeks ago and she goes, Mosh, you must have Alyssa on your podcast.
Thank you, Alex.
So Alex was all over this. We are the parents of we're just days away, actually, as we record this, from her turning 2.
Yeah.
So a lot of helpful advice in your
birthday.
last book, Tiny Humans, Big Emotions. That was very geared towards the youngest set. And now you're out with your new book here, Big Kids, Bigger Feelings, which is 5 to 12.
That's right. Elementary school age. Yeah.
So you're kind of just going through the stages of life here.
That's right. People were like, when was the teenager book coming? I'm like, I need a nap, actually.
But you're the mom of 2, but your kids are super young still, right?
That's right. I have a 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. Yeah.
How is the return to school? How is that going right now?
It's going okay, actually. It's largely that this is the busiest season for me work-wise always, even outside of publishing a book. So that's the bulk of it for me in this season. The kids have been pretty rad, but it's a big time for a lot of professional development and conferences for education happen in this season. So
Yeah, before we get into the book, you developed and you run your own organization, Seed and Sow.
that's right.
Explain what that is and what you do.
Yeah, I did research in building emotional intelligence in kids in partnership with Brandeis University. In my first book, we share all about that. My co-author of the first book, Lauren Stabel, we co-created the collaborative emotion processing method. We researched it, and it is really looking at how do we build emotional intelligence in kids. And so we serve early childhood programs, child cares, daycares, family child care providers. And then as we were doing that, we were in like pre-K programs that were in public schools and started to get messages from principals that were like, actually, we need this for our kindergarten, our first, our second. And so we started to develop systems and supports for elementary school programs and have been serving elementary schools now for about 4 years. And that's the bulk of our work, is that we're really working in school districts, helping to support regulation and emotion processing in action.
How does that work in terms of what can be done at the home and what you can do in schools?
Yeah, so they work hand in hand. Our first and foremost work that we do is help you understand how the unique nervous system works. So what this looks like in schools is looking at what is draining for this kid and what's regulating. We often talk about our first 5 senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. We have 4 more that go untalked about often. We have our vestibular sense and system, and it's located in your inner ear. It's responsible for your movement and balance. It keeps you upright. People who are vestibular seeking are going to spin in a chair like this. And like that, people who are vestibular sensitive will get motion sickness from that. Proprioceptive sense, it helps you know where your body ends and something else begins. So kids who are like a bull in a china shop have low proprioceptive awareness. They have a hard time knowing where their body ends and something else begins. I run into the corner of my bed frame all the time. It doesn't move, but my body has a hard time clocking, where do I end? Where does that begin? And then we have our interoceptive sense, which is the one that lets us know if we're hungry, if we're tired, is our heart beating fast, kind of what's happening internally. And then we have our neuroceptive sense. I call this our spidey sense. It's the one that really reads the energy of the room. Like if you walk in and 2 people have been in conflict and they stop arguing, but you can feel that tension, that's your neuroceptive sense.
And some people are very good at sensing that, and some people just
Correct.
have no clue as to what's going on
Correct.
around them.
Exactly. And that's where we're looking at the people who are really good at sensing that are neuroceptive sensitive. They're really sensitive to that. And so we worked with a group of occupational therapists to put together a questionnaire that folks can take for any age group, including adults. And it helps you understand where somebody is sensitive, where they're seeking. So essentially what drains them, what recharges them with all 9 of those senses. And then what does that information mean? And so we use that both with families to know, if you have a kid who's high sensory seeking, they might be climbing all over or jumping, or they can't stop moving. And what are some behaviors you might see at different ages and stages? And what are some tools and supports that might be helpful? And then in school systems, all of our schools that we work with, they have families do the regulation questionnaire, and it goes into this portal that then the teacher can log on and see all the kids in their classroom and know okay, my sensory sensitive kids are going to need a break from stimuli throughout the day. What do we have built in place for them? Our sensory seekers are going to need more movement. What do we have in place for them? And we work with a school district in upstate New York that is a high needs school. They have high poverty, a number of kids who have at least one incarcerated parent, some homelessness. And we came in and in working with them from Q1 to Q2, all we did was focus on this first and foremost. And we saw a 60% reduction in behavior support calls, just focusing on that nervous system regulation. And that carries over from home to school.
Yeah, you talk a lot in the book about customizing your approach. As a parent for each of your kids, sounds like you're talking about the same thing for teachers and customizing their approach to students. Is that one of the major mistakes parents make, is that it's like sort of one size fits all typically?
That's exactly it. And we often do what our nervous system needs. So for me, my daughter and I are a sensory match. We both are like kind of high seeking. She's like, talk to me, validate my feelings. She wants to sit in my lap. She loves a hug. And that's what I like as well. My son and I are a sensory mismatch. He's like, stop talking to me. Please just give me space, leave me alone. And I'm like, do you want a hug? Do you want to? And I'm like wanting to give him really what I need.
Partially because you want that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so how do you recommend approaching that, analyzing that? At what age can you start to get a sense of who your kid is, as you kind of go through the parenting process?
Yeah, so you can do it from birth, which is pretty rad. The questionnaire actually goes down to infants. So you can start to notice these things of even in like, is this a kid who wants a lot of movement and they want to be like bounced to sleep and rocked a bunch? Or are they a kid where my son, who's sensory sensitive, we like went to a wedding. He didn't cry actually a lot as a baby. He would go into shutdown mode. He still does predominantly. And we went to a wedding and he was so overstimulated. He like couldn't stop crying every time we were in the space. And we're like, okay, this is overwhelming for him. Like they'll give us those cues and those clues when we know what we're looking for. And because most of the humans doing this work are not occupational therapists, they're parents and teachers and folks in everyday life. That's why we built it right into the book so that you don't have to figure this out on your own.
So a lot of what you get into in the book, at least in the beginning stages, is like what parents can be doing, should be doing, the lessons that we also learned from our parents, and you discussed that. And so you mentioned you're one of 5 siblings.
Yeah.
What did you learn from your parents that you utilize today? And what are some things that you realized you had to unlearn from your time as a child?
Totally. A bunch on both ends. Actually, I wrote in Tiny Humans, sometimes I open my mouth and my mom comes out and like, sometimes that's great. And sometimes I don't want to pass that on. And so when we're looking at the like things that for me, I do want to pass on, one of the things that was super important in our household growing up was respect. And it was under this really big umbrella that some parts of that are still parts I want to pass on, like respect for yourself, respect for each other, speaking kindly to each other, not doing things like screaming or yelling or throwing things at each other, whether it's in conflict or in regulating times. And also under that umbrella, deemed respect growing up for me was obedience. And that's not something I want to
Right. You talk about distinguishing here between respect and obedience, and sometimes we confuse it to be the same thing.
That's right. And I want my kids to be able to ask why and question a boundary. It doesn't mean I'm moving the boundary, but we can talk about it. And in my household growing up, it was because I said so.
So you've eliminated the because I said so.
Yeah. Although it's real tempting sometimes.
It's easier that way.
It's so much easier.
Especially like if you're short-tempered, you've had a long day, like, yeah.
100%. It's harder to be intentional, and rewriting patterns from how we grew up requires intention because we want to operate from our subconscious, which is where all of our habits and patterns are. And so if I'm going to do something that's different from how I was raised, I need to use my conscious brain, and that's exhausting. It takes energy and work.
Well, explain that distinction between respect and obedience. What's an example of how parents might confuse one for the other?
Totally. So the questioning is an example of like, if I say, hey, bud, in 5 minutes, we're going to turn off the TV and get ready to head up for bedtime and do Tubby. And he's like, why? I want to watch This Is 7 minutes long or whatever. I have 7 minutes left in my show. In my household, it would have been like, nope, said 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, we're shutting that off. Like, there is no room for negotiation. It is that the adult said this, and now this is what is. And that was the obedience piece. We were expected to, when my mom came in and said, nope, turn it off, it's going off. And for me, part of respect is showing my children respect. So I'm like, okay, if somebody came in and I had a minute and a half left in my show and they're like, well, no, I had said arbitrarily 5 minutes, and I'm going to come in and shut this off. I'm like, okay, 7 minutes is reasonable. That's not going to drastically change our bedtime if we wait an extra 90 seconds. Let's rock and roll. But if he was like, no, there's 25 minutes left, I'd be like, yeah, your body's going to start to get overtired. We're going to turn it off in 5 minutes and we can figure out another time together to watch the other 20 or whatever. It's being able to have conversation.
What's wrong with because I said so?
Yeah. First of all, our kids, I want them to push back against boundaries and get curious so that they can ask, well, why is this a rule instead of just blindly following rules? That's how we see change happen in the world, is when we say like,
The lessons they learn in the house, right?
Correct.
So you don't want them to learn because I said so, because that means in society, at school, in life, they might not ask questions.
That's right. And we're just continuing to enforce that. If we say like, nope, when an adult says, because I said so, or this is the rule, you have to follow it. And there are some rules that should be questioned.
One of the things you also brought up about your childhood was you lived in a house where there's no room for sadness,
Yeah.
expressing emotions, that your sadness was met with dismissal. How long did it take you to realize that, and how has that now applied to how you parent and how you write about it in this book?
Yeah. That is still the hardest emotion for me to allow for myself to feel and for my kids. And it really came to light for me when I had kids. So much of this work does, where we're like, oh, wow, they really shine a light on how we grew up and what we have to work on and all that jazz. And the one that like sticks out for me was driving my son to a new childcare program. He was 2.5 and he didn't want to go. And he's in the first week of school and we're on the way there. And he was like, I'm going to be at school and I'm going to be sad and I'm going to be all alone. And in that moment, I was like, I don't need this. I'll quit this job. Like, let's go home. I can avoid this. And had to like really dive deep into this work and let him know that it's okay to be sad. And watching somebody feel sad and allowing them to feel sad, it's really hard for me to do. I have to really pump the brakes on trying to make it go away. So what I want to say is, oh, buddy, you're going to have so much fun at school. Do you remember yesterday when we got there and they had the Legos out on the table and you were playing with them and you were having so much fun? I wonder what they're going to have on the table today. I want to make the sadness go away.
Yeah.
And instead,
I feel like that's every parent. They want to make the sadness go.
Yeah, like wrap them up in a bubble. Please have them not feel sad.
Yeah.
And when we don't get to practice feeling sad, we don't learn that sadness actually will come and go. And feelings are like quicksand, where when you try to make them go away or avoid them, you actually sink deeper into them. They stay for longer. I think Inside Out, actually, that movie Inside Out does a really good job depicting this, where Joy keeps trying to make sadness kind of go away and don't feel sad, don't feel sad. And then once they sit with sadness and they feel sad for a little bit, all of a sudden they stop feeling sad and they get back to other feelings. And that's what happens for us.
How long do you let your child sit with sadness though?
Yeah, right.
Okay, let's embrace this sadness in this car ride to school.
Yep.
How long are we going for it before we can come up with a distraction?
Totally. Asking for a friend.
Just asking for somebody who might have a 2-year-old who, sometimes is sad, right?
It would be so nice if there was like a magical timeline. What we're looking at is, do they have tools to navigate it and get out of it, or do they get stuck in it where they can't get out? So if I sent him to school and I picked him up and he had been crying all day, that tells me he does not have tools to navigate the sadness. And so we would then tap into some other distractions and be working on tools outside the moment. But instead, what I said to him was, yeah, buddy, it makes sense to feel sad leaving me. And it also makes sense to be lonely when you're at school and you don't know these people yet and you don't feel safe there yet. And do you want to know something so cool about feelings? I said, do you remember you were playing that game with Dad yesterday and you were on his shoulders and spinning around and you were laughing and having fun and you were happy? And right now you're not feeling happy and you're not having fun, because all of our feelings stay for a little bit and then we get new feelings. Those ones go. You're going to feel sad for a little bit and then you'll feel something else. You might feel nervous, you might feel excited, you might feel curious, but you won't stay feeling sad the whole time. It's okay to feel that. And then I asked him, when you're feeling sad, what helps you feel safe? And he said Slothy, his stuffed animal. And I was like, okay, cool. Would it be helpful to have Slothy in your classroom until you feel safe? And he was like, yeah. Great. So then we had a plan in place for how he can move through it. And
This is your 4-year-old.
he was 2.5 at the time.
It was 2.5 at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now he is 4. And yeah, he then had his slothy in the classroom. He would hide under this little slide and be crying and hiding with his slothy when I would say goodbye. Then I'd get a message from school, usually like 5-10 minutes later, him sitting at a table and playing and engaged again. But I want him to know that he doesn't have to make that sadness go away, that it's safe to feel.
There's been this pushback on gentle parenting. It was called gentle parenting. Sure. There was a news story recently about F around and find out parenting is back. Sure. Then I heard from a lot of Gen Xers and millennials yep, that's the way I was raised.
Of course.
And it distinguished for me what you're laying out here versus gentle parenting versus F around and find out parenting.
Sure.
And where that falls on the spectrum, because there's again been this pushback that gentle parenting or a version of it has led to a whole generation of Gen Z that is not resilient.
I don't think that's entirely wrong. I think what they're really seeing is what I would call that snowplow parenting when they're calling it gentle parenting, where we remove...
or lawnmower parenting.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
You're just taking things out of their way. I'll give you an example. We had a parent reach out in my DMs recently who was like, oh my gosh, my 9-year-old, the kids were all together and they were doing TikTok dances, this group of girls, and her daughter wasn't invited and it's her group of friends. And she's like, she's devastated. Do you think I should reach out to these other moms? And that is part of the problem. Do we step in and save them from these hard things versus, sometimes they're going to be left out. Sometimes they're going to feel disappointed and sad and bummed. And if we step in to save them from those things, we do have a group of kids then who don't have tools for resilience because we've taken away the obstacles and the hard things. And then eventually they're going to still experience them. They're not going to get into the school they want. They're not going to get the job they want. They're going to feel left out and disappointed in all the feelings around the spectrum throughout their whole life. And if we have not given them the opportunity to practice what it's like to be in those feelings with our guidance, with our support, then they don't have a toolbox for them. So I don't think it's entirely wrong that we have raised kids who don't have tools for resilience by trying to remove obstacles out of their way.
But it's not because in your research and experience that we're, spending time in their emotions and we're, the conversations that you described having.
No. In fact, spending time in their emotions and allowing them to be in them is what builds resilience. Yeah, you write in the book about research showing that parents are the primary predictor of a child's level of emotional intelligence. How we react to things matters. How big a deal, first of all, I guess we should define this. Define emotional intelligence. Yeah, sure. And translate for me the impact of building emotional intelligence or not having it on what that does in your teen years and as an adult. Yeah, we're seeing it all over the place. So we look at 5 components for emotional intelligence. Self-awareness. It's the noticing. My son calls this the volcano. Noticing what's happening inside before you explode. My heart's beating fast, or my mind's racing, or I feel like I really have to say something in this moment and my thoughts are going so fast and I have to interject. That's usually my sign of pump the brakes, Alyssa. Self-regulation. Once you notice that, what helps your nervous system calm? This is the part where it's not one size fits all. What helps me calm is different than what helps my husband calm. And so understanding your unique nervous system's really key there. Empathy. And this is where we empathize with what somebody's feeling, not why they're feeling it. So when your daughter this morning chucks the plate of food. Yeah, before we recorded here, I mentioned to Alyssa that our near 2-year-old decided we think it's for attention. Yeah. She just chucked her plate on the ground. Correct. Yes. Yeah. And it got her some attention. So she's like... Oh, she got a lot of attention afterwards. Well done. Well done, sister. And so when we're looking at this, the empathy part is... I know what it feels like to really want to connect with somebody and not have that connection present at that time, for their connection to be elsewhere. I have gone to tell my husband something that I'm excited about, and he's in his phone responding to a text or an email. And I'm like, okay, I'll wait till you're done. I want your attention is what I'm saying there. That's what she was saying this morning. And when we look at this from a place of, I understand what you're feeling, not, and I condone the behavior, and I think I would feel the same way about that in that moment, but I know that feeling, that's empathy. We also look at motivation, which is intrinsic versus extrinsic. Extrinsic is the are you proud of me? Intrinsic is I'm proud of me. And so how are we fostering some of that intrinsic motivation so that kids are doing things not just for the reward on the outside or the praise or to feel loved or valued by somebody else, but so that they feel loved and valued by themselves. And then we have social skills. This is the part where we can differentiate what's appropriate at home versus at school in peer groups versus with my grandma, and really kind of read that room. Those are the 5 components of emotional intelligence we're looking at. For all of our kids and all of us as humans, some of them come more easily or naturally, and some of them are harder for us to grasp and work on. And I believe that parents are the expert on their child. And you know which ones of these are like, oh yeah, that one's harder for them. My daughter, social skills come very easily. She walks into a room of 100 people she doesn't know, and she's like, 100 new friends, cannot wait. This is a party. My son walks into a room of 100 people he doesn't know, and he's like, ugh, yikes. Like, deuces, get me out. And so for him, we have to do a lot more support and work on the social skills piece. And for her, I don't need to foster a lot of support and skills in that area. For him, self-regulation and self-awareness come easier. He's really good at noticing what's happening inside and learning, okay, what helps me calm. For her, tuning into what's happening inside before she's exploded is harder. And so I have to foster more of those skills for her.
Interesting example. You mentioned with the son sort of feeling overwhelmed by people. There's a lot of people who go to adult, like introverts, right?
Yep, correct.
And then, some parents are immediately like, no, meet this person and meet this, like trying to force, like, what is the appropriate way to deal with like your son's social situation? So, like the feeling of anxiety when they enter a room with a lot of strangers.
Yeah. For kids who experience that where like the stimuli feels like a lot of meeting new people, pre-teaching. So giving them a heads up. And this is something we do in our elementary and middle school programs. We often do it with younger kids and then we stop doing it as they get older. And it's beneficial for all humans, adults included, to let them know what to expect. So when you come into this room, here's who's going to be there. Remember last time when we were at Grammy and Pa's house and Aunt Mary came over and Uncle Mark came over? They're going to be there when we get there.
It's all about expectations and preparation.
Correct. And the brain loves to know what to expect. The known feels safe and comfortable. And so especially for our sensory sensitive kids who get overwhelmed by that stimuli, when we can prep them with what to expect, it goes such a long way. So kickstarting with that and then allowing them to take their time, saying things like, yeah, if you want to stand over here until you're ready, go ahead. When you're ready, here are ways that you could say hi. And those are things that my son needs a lot more coaching on than my daughter. We're like, yeah, do you want to give a high five or a hug or a wave? And she's like, D, all of the above, like, let's go. And for him, we have to remind him, you don't have to look in their eyes. It is important in our household that you learn how to say hi to people. And so we're going to say hi to people when you're ready. You can wave, you can say hi, you can give a high five, your choice.
You describe in the book being compassionate detectives. Mm-hmm. That's the way that you describe parents should be when it comes to discovering what it is that makes your child tick.
Yeah. All behavior is communication of a need. In fact, if people leave this work with nothing else, I hope it's that they know that all behavior is communication of a need. And it could be a sensory need, like I'm hungry, I'm tired, I need to move my body, I'm overstimulated. Or it could be a connection need. I feel left out, I don't feel included, I don't feel like I belong, I don't feel worthy or loved. I need that connection. And so when we're looking at behaviors, we get to be that detective and say, what are they doing right now? Where's it coming from? Because we can play whack-a-mole on behaviors all day long. But if we meet the need that's driving it, you see behavior change.
You were talking about the extra senses. You dive into the nervous system in the book. Large funnel spouts, small funnel spouts. I would love to discuss that. That was eye-opening to me.
Yeah.
Like I went through high school biology, et cetera.
Yeah.
I don't remember discussing, maybe I missed it. Sorry, teach. On funnel spouts. But describe the nervous system and then how that translates to your child's behaviors and what we can learn both about them, but also ourselves.
Totally. Yes, we have a QR code in the book where you can scan that questionnaire and it kind of dives into this. When we're looking at those 9 sensory systems, Are humans who have that like small funnel spout, they are people who, if I think of this like if I had two funnels that were the same size with the different size spouts, if I'm pouring sand in at the same rate at the top, one's going to overflow faster than the other. The one with the small spout is going to it's going to overflow faster. The one with the big funnel spout is going to keep sand coming through quicker. My husband is a small funnel spout person. So he's a human who notices all the details in the space. The other day, he was like, "Oh, you clipped your nails." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, thanks for noticing. I feel seen." And he was like, "No, you put the nail clippers back on the wrong spot." And I was like, "Oh, not where I thought that was going." But thanks. It was like a little to the left of where it normally goes. But he's a details person. He'll always say, like, "Don't put it down, put it away. Like, don't put it on the counter, put it where it goes." Clutter adds up for him. Those details in the space he notices in a way that my brain doesn't. I should like never edit your paper. My like nightmare scenario is that I'm called in for like a crime scene situation and I have to name any details of it. Like what color was the car they were driving, whatever. I'm like, was there a car? And Zach could like draw you the car. He has a small funnel spout. What this means is his brain gets overwhelmed and overstimulated faster than mine does, because he's paying attention to all those details in the space. And we need all these humans. We need small funnel spout people who notice the details in the space. We need large funnel spout people who can filter that stimuli and take more at a time. These are people who often thrive in a like large environment, like open working space environment or at a conference where you can handle a lot of stimuli and filter it out. And when we're looking at this, it helps me have compassion for him, where he's not just like tapping out from parenting. He needs more frequent breaks than I do. I can take more of the stimuli of our kids at a given time than he can. And when we can navigate this kind of give and take of how does your nervous system work, what do you proactively need? And then in the moment, what do you need? It, for us, provides so much more compassion for each other and then for the kids to know how theirs work too. You
describe actually like a situation that's probably pretty common where, you know, you had a long day, the kids are like active, you're preparing dinner, they start to ask for, you know, things to be picked out of their plate.
Yeah.
And then your husband comes home, you thought you were getting a break and you weren't.
No.
Talk to me about that scenario and what you learned about yourself and how, as parents, we can all sort of apply those lessons.
Totally. Well, and that's the expectations, the pre-teaching part also coming into play. If he had texted before coming home, been like, "Hey, I have to work later tonight, like, gotta pop in and finish something. What needs to happen for me to do that?" And I can make a plan ahead of time versus I'm like counting down the minutes till he comes home because I'm overstimulated and overwhelmed with the kids.
And then
he walks in, he's like, exactly. And he's like, I got to go tap into work. Then my expectations in that moment have to shift and change. So even that heads up, again, as adults, we love it. Even that heads up coming in would be so helpful. And so that's something that we learned. Like if we have a certain expectation, if we can give the other one a heads up of what needs to shift or change before we're in it, really helpful. And being able to ask things like, what needs to happen for me to do that? Or what can I do to be helpful here? On both ends for us, for him to me to him. And for me, it's also looking at like, okay, if this was a repeated pattern where every single night I'm getting fried by the time we get to dinner time with my kids, what do I need to have in place? One thing I've started doing is wearing like loop earplugs, which I'm a sound sensitive human. So for me, like sound really adds up. And kids aren't just like, okay, I'll be quiet because you're irritated by sound. Like that's not how that works.
At least not in the first 10 years, at least.
No.
Yeah.
And I wear them from like 4 to 7 p.m. every night where I can hear everybody. It just makes it a little quieter for me and then more tolerable. Or I've learned for myself that on the way to like pick them up, I've got to stop doing work and even listen to like one song where I'm in control of sound. I'm choosing it and I'm not going from like one thing immediately into picking them up. And I haven't had a minute to just like calm.
So it's recognizing these things about yourself because ultimately you talk in that scenario that like you're, you know, so annoyed when your husband said he had to work that you just like stormed off from dinner.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, because I'm overwhelmed and then I am at a place where I can't make rational decisions when we're in that. Nobody can. When you get to that space, your prefrontal cortex, your rational thinking brain's offline. And if we want that to come back online, we got to access regulation first. And so I needed space and a minute to chill, and then I can come back. But if I had proactively supported myself throughout the day, then you have more capacity for changes in the environment, for the stimuli. And so often we're just going, getting to a place of like depletion, losing our cool and trying to come back from that. So much of the work that we do with families and in schools is about proactively supporting that throughout the day. We actually had a teacher last year. She's sensory sensitive and she teaches kindergarten. And so it's a lot of stimuli for her throughout the day.
For a sensory sensitive person to
Correct.
teach kindergarten that itself is a challenge.
Correct. And it's actually pretty cool seeing the regulation data come in. So many of our teachers are sensory sensitive, and it's a
Do you think that makes
stimulating environment.
In some ways that attracts them in some weird way to the environment?
I wonder if it's just percentage of people that like.
Got it.
There are enough sensory sensitive humans in the world that some of them are going to also end up in education. But one thing that we did with this teacher, she was getting to the place where she'd get so overwhelmed that then she needed obedience from the kids and like compliance from the kids because her nervous system couldn't handle more movement, more noise, more chaos. And what we did with her was put together a self-care plan for her about her nervous system. It was 4 total minutes a day. There were 4 times in the day where kids would leave her classroom, go to a special, go to lunch, etc. And we said, before you do anything else, before you go to the bathroom, before you talk to anyone, before you lesson plan, before you do anything else, we want you to turn off the lights in your room, set a timer for 1 minute. It's going to look bonkers, but you're going to lay on your floor in your classroom and close your eyes for 1 minute. That's it. Just give your nervous system a break from stimuli for 1 minute, 4 times a day. And she was... About a week later, she emailed us and was like, I'm annoyed at how effective this is. When you wrote it to me and sent it over, I was like, in 4 minutes is not going to be
Sounds ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah. And we think that it's going to be these like big chunks of time we need. And it's actually kind of like microdosing for our nervous system. That's so much more effective.
Right. I think the reaction you get from many parents is like, I just don't have enough time. I got work. I got family, and like we're the age group where, we're also helping sometimes take care of our parents.
Correct.
The world is a crazy place and is overwhelmingly, and I have social media. That's like, and so it feels like literally there is not a second in the day.
Correct.
To take care of ourselves.
Yeah. And I'm looking at like, how do we do this in 1 minute at a time? Or even when we're building in systems in classrooms, we're looking at 30 seconds to a minute most of the time, where it's a part of their transition from one activity to the other. And we have 2 options. Like you can either stand on one foot and pat your head and rub your belly for 30 seconds, or you can do jumping jacks for 30 seconds. So our kids who need movement are getting it. Our kids who need like downtime and stillness are getting what they need. And it's 30 seconds to a minute. So often we're like, I'm going to go for a run or I'm going to do this thing. And like, hopefully that lasts for the whole day for me. And in about 3 hours, that's not serving your nervous system anymore. And so when we're looking at this, we're saying, how do we get bite-sized chunks throughout the day to continue to kind of plug that phone in, recharge yourself?
We were talking earlier about building resiliency, not intervening on behalf of your kids. You talk a bit about peer pressure. I mean, you dive in a number of chapters here. You got lying, you got peer pressure, you have like dealing with your kids' disappointment. How do you work on that as a parent? How do you prevent bulldozer, snowplow, lawnmower, whatever metaphor you want to use these days, tendencies, especially as, at 6 years old, someone took the toy, like that's one thing. But, increasingly as they get older, the issues get older and they feel more real. And you feel like, oh my God, I can't see my child that upset.
100%. It's self-awareness is our greatest tool and the one we overlook the most. Noticing for yourself before you do anything. What's the story you're telling yourself? That if they aren't involved in this group or they're not allowed to play on the team or that they have been left out or excluded in some capacity or embarrassed in some capacity. That's a big one that starts to come up in this age range.
Or being bullied.
Yeah. And bullied is a word we dive into in the book because we break down what's the difference between rude and mean and bullying behavior and recognizing that there is a difference. And that when we're looking at this, bullied usually requires some adult interaction. We also look at what policies tend to look like in schools right now and what data is showing around them and what we could do to be more effective in our response. When we're looking at somebody who's bullying somebody else, what I'm most curious about is what is the need driving the behavior for the bully?
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to feel included? Are they trying to feel worthy or loved or valued? Are they living in a culture where they've learned that power and control is the goal? And now they've gotten a little older and they're learning how to have power and control in some capacity. This is that obedience parenting, like trickling down. If you have said power and control is the goal over and over and over to your kid,
they're not modeling that
correct.
in school. Yeah.
Now they're like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to have is power and control.
But you're the parent of the kid being bullied or being like, where do you draw the line between like calling the school, calling the teacher, or like, no, this is something you're going to have to deal with on your own?
Yeah. If they're being bullied, which we outline in the book of like, what does that really look like? It's repeated. It means that person has power, control over you, dominance over you. It's intentional and it's multiple instances. And if we're seeing that, then I as a parent am getting involved. And I'm saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing. I would love to know what you're doing to support this. And as a parent, I'm going to be advocating for the bully to not just like get in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, which is like a snooze button where you're like, okay, pause. This kid's not going to be in school for 5 days and then they're back. What are you doing to address the root of the behavior for this child? What restorative practices might be in place in the school system? Those are things I'm looking at. And we have tons of resources in here of like, how do you advocate for them at school and for school systems? What are systems you can have in place?
But the thing I hear from teachers, and we had Jonathan Haidt of Anxious Generation on, even at the college professor level, you have parents like messaging professors, teachers about their kids' grades or an assignment. So, so bullying is one category, but then sort of everything below that. Where
I'm not reaching out to the teacher.
Yeah, the modern parent or the a parent of the last generation, feels the need to get involved on behalf of their kids.
Totally, and that's that snowplow piece coming in, right? That's the lack of resilience. And so anything under bullying, I'm not getting involved with the school for the most part. I am also not calling other people's parents and saying like, hey, your kid's doing X, Y, and Z, or they're left out. We should help them figure this out. Instead, what I'm saying to my kid is what it looks like to be left out or embarrassed, and that I know that feeling, and you don't have to navigate this alone. Here are tools for it. Mm-hmm. And when they're regulated and calm, some self-advocacy tools if they're interested in that. If you did want to say something to this person, here are some ideas of things you could say. We'll walk through some of those scripts. Like you might say something along the lines of, hey, when you guys were all doing that TikTok dance, I felt really left out, because maybe it was on purpose, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe they just all happened to be sitting at the lunch table together and they're like, yeah, let's do this dance. And they didn't even think about you. Maybe it wasn't intentional. And so they could say something like that. Or if they don't want to, they don't have to. And that's the part for us that's so hard to let go of often, is they might choose to say nothing and just keep hanging out with these people. We just get to give them the tools and they get to decide if they're going to apply them or not.
Technology has been a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
You address it in the book. The internet, YouTube, smartphones, TV. Mm-hmm. As you've been looking at the data and your experience, especially as you focus in the sort of kindergarten through 5th grade, 6th grade set here in this book, is there a rules to the road? Is every kid different in terms of how you should be approaching it?
Every kid is different, and what we're looking at mostly is how do you maintain a relationship of connection with them as you're navigating these? Because we could give you rules right now, and what we know is tech's going to continue to evolve. And so I'm way more interested in how do you keep conversation open and teach your kids about the science as we know it. We don't give kids enough credit for what they're capable of learning about. And now my 4-year-old the other day was teaching me about hydraulics that he was just learning about. I'm like,
the YouTube algorithm is an amazing thing, right?
It's so great. And he is we were talking about this, you're like love for nonfiction as a kid. He's like that. He loves nonfiction. He loves facts. He loves learning about things. And we don't give them enough credit for what they're capable of. When we're working with kids, we're talking to them about those 9 senses, and I'm saying all the real names for it. I had a kindergartner last year who is struggling academically and told me that he needed vestibular input. And I was like, yes, let's go. They are so capable of learning this when we give them credit for it. And so with tech and boundaries, I want to talk to them about the science. I want to be able to say things to them like, you know what? We learned about this thing called dopamine, and here's what it does in your body. And when you are watching YouTube shorts or you're scrolling through TikTok reels, here's what's happening in your brain and body. Let's put some systems in place so that you aren't leaving feeling overwhelmed and dysregulated afterwards.
Yeah, you see that effect, right? Like you turn off the YouTube and like it's a shock to the system. They're crying, they're upset, they want it back. Like
right.
The addiction is quick.
Yeah. And it depends on the kid. I'll say like, and having 2 kids, it's been really glaring for me. They're 2 very different humans. One of them can easily transition away from screens, and one of them it's harder for. And they like to engage in different things. My one who's really high connection seeking, the only screens that kiddo's interested in are ones where somebody's talking to them, like is not interested in watching a show, is like, oh, like Miss Rachel. She's like, yes, she's talking to me. She's looking in the screen. There's like an interaction back and forth. My daughter's all over that. And then if I offer her connection as a part of the transition out of that, she's into it because all she's really looking for there is connection. And I just used this show so I could make dinner and out of my 2 kids arguing. And so it's looking at like, what are they getting out of this screen? Actually, my friend Ash Brandon recently published a book. They're a librarian, and their handle is The Gamer Educator. Their book is Power On, and they go into awesome latest research and data on screens and brings in a bunch of this work on regulation and the how-tos of that. But looking at what are they getting from the screen is so important. Are they getting a downtime and distraction? Great. How else do we provide that? In the same way that there are days that I end where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to use my brain space right now. I want to like watch episodes of The Office and like zone out versus, yeah, I want to watch a documentary and learn about something. What are we getting from it?
Yeah, and even like a lot of sites that come out, they don't distinguish like what were they watching on the screen time, because, I think a lot of parents are just looking for rules of the road. Like, okay, a 2-year-old, like what is the amount of time that is good, like healthy, that I can't go over every day, that'll get me the time I need to like cook dinner or clean the, house or whatever I need. Obviously some people also use it at like a restaurant. Totally. Like some people then use it in the car. It's a slippery slope, right? Totally. And so I guess what you're saying is like there's no like Mosheh. I wish I could tell you like 17 minutes a day is the maximum amount of time. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, knowing what they're using it for is so crucial. And like what's the speed of it and what is their reaction afterward? If we'll use it for rest time. My daughter takes a nap and my son doesn't anymore. And for me, I'm like, okay, I can have like 30 minutes where she's napping and he'll watch a show. And then the rest of her nap, then I'm looking at, okay, what did he get from that show? For him, it's often also just like a break. So he wants to watch something that he already knows usually at that point. So he has a couple like YouTube videos that are all about like learning stuff that he's really into. And he wants to watch the same ones on repeat. He's like almost never during that time of the day choosing something new. And so what I know is that he usually needs some downtime there. And so when we're transitioning out of the screen at rest time, I'm looking at, okay, if he needs downtime, what are other activities that provide that downtime? Or if we have kids as they get older where they're using this as a way to connect with each other, that they're playing video games together and it's a form of connection. Cool. How else are they going to get that connection? What does that look like? And really looking at what they're getting out of it and how we fulfill that outside of a screen is so crucial.
One thing you write about is the parents can avoid some of the battles with their kids by teaching healthy coping skills, but also ensuring certain needs, food, sleep. To what extent is diet overlooked and nutrition overlooked when it comes to the impact that has on your kids' behavior?
Yeah, and all of us as humans.
Yeah.
Right,
as adults too, right? Like,
right.
Why do I feel like crap today? And it's like, oh, I like missed a meal. The thing I had was just like a piece of bread, like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, am I hangry? Like, is that what's actually happening here? Yeah, it plays a role, and it's tricky because it's become such a hard topic to talk about, and then it's triggering for a lot of folks, and so they'll just shut it off, or they're like, well, I don't want to talk about food. And I think we've got to find the middle ground here of it does play a role in how we feel, in that we shared this example in the book of we're at like family vacation, we go to the beach and we get down to the beach and everybody's a disaster. And it's like 10 a.m. and I'm like, what is going on? My husband was like, well, we had like donuts for breakfast and came to the beach. And it was true. Like my mother-in-law had shown up in the morning at our beach house and was like, hey, I brought over donuts and everyone's jazzed.
Oh, it's the mother-in-law.
Always, she's incredible and also loves a fun snack.
Yeah.
And so we were like, yeah, that's actually what's going on. No one had any food that was going to sustain them. And now everyone's on a sugar crash and is a disaster. We busted out some like snacks from our bag and kids were making peanut butter crackers and having cheese sticks and some beach snacks that would maybe have a little protein and give them a little bit of something to work with. That it doesn't have to be, I think, so fine-tuned, but that we do have to pay attention to this of, are they on a sugar crash? We talk about this in schools a lot because as they get older, there isn't as much monitoring of their food and what they had and what time was it at and all that jazz. And if we have kids coming in to school and their lunch isn't until 1:30 and school started at 7:30, 8 o'clock, so last time, then you're trying to get them to do math at like noon and they're hungry. They're not going to actually be able to do the math. And so how are we building this into the day in a way where we can make sure they have the most capacity to navigate the day or whatever cognitive activity we're going to ask them to do?
It's very interesting because you could probably track it when you look at your kids' grades as they get older too. And you're like, why are they, and it's like, oh, are these classes the classes they take in the afternoon? Does that mean like, honestly, if we just change their diet, that like their grade is going to go from C to B plus or something? Yeah.
And when it's so interesting you say that because we're working with a school right now who's super open and receptive to this work we're doing. And they were like, should we look at our schedule for academics in the day and base that around what we call the FACTS in here, which is the foundation for regulation: food, activity, connection, tune out, sleep. And we were like, yes, let's do it. And so we got to play with the admin team around, okay, yeah, when is math for this age range in comparison to when they had to use their brain in other ways, or when they had movement time, or when their brain had a break, or when they had food. And I'm excited to see how that plays out for them this school year.
One thing before you go, you've developed something called collaborative emotion processing. Explain what that is and how parents can incorporate that.
Yeah. So Lauren Stabile, my co-author of Tiny Humans, and I developed the SEP method, and then we partnered with Brandeis to research it. And it's 5 components. One is adult-child interactions. It's how we engage with them, how we respond in the moment, how we respond outside the moment. The other 4 are about us. It's self-awareness for us, noticing what's happening before we explode, uncovering our implicit biases. This is where we're noticing those narratives we have from our childhood. Things like, they're old enough to know better, or age biases come into play a ton in this age range, where we have teachers who are like, they're in 3rd grade. They should know how to do this by now. They shouldn't be throwing their pencil on the ground anymore, crying at school, or whatever it is. Those are all biases that we learned from our childhood. It's our social programming and our narratives and stories from our parents, from our teachers, from our cultural programming. And then we have scientific knowledge and self-care. And these kind of pair together. So our self-care, we dive into those 9 sensory systems of what does it really look like to take care of you as an individual? My husband and I, very different humans. He is sensory sensitive and I'm sensory seeking. And so we were going on a trip and we were going to be all together for like 10 days. And the weekend before, we carved out time where he got to have time to just kind of recharge and do whatever he wanted. I got to have time to recharge and do whatever I wanted, just to fill our cups a little bit before a long trip together. And he went and like totally solo, went record shopping, like went out to lunch, went for a hike. I, in my time, was fully in a group of friends. We like went thrift shopping. We went out to lunch in a group. We all hung out. And if he had done what I'd done, he would have come home needing a break from it. If I had done what he had done, I would have come home like clamoring for connection and stimulation. And so that self-care piece is really not one size fits all. It's customized. And then the scientific knowledge is understanding things like mirror neurons, and that when I come in with this energy to my kids, their nervous system says, yikes, don't let your guard down. She is not safe. But if I come in with this energy and I'm like, hey guys, what's going on? It sends a totally different message to their nervous system and says, okay, you're safe. You can be vulnerable. You can start to calm. And that we play such a huge role in being able to set that temperature in the room.
So where can people learning more about that method?
Yeah,
about
it's in both
themselves?
books. So
Yeah.
we dive deep into it in Tiny Humans, and then we go into it in Big Kids as well, and how it evolves as they get older.
So Tiny Humans, now Big Kids. What's the one thing you want people to take away from the new book?
That it's
If there's only one thing.
Yeah, that it's not one size fits all in understanding your unique nervous system. We actually have a QR code in Big Kids for that questionnaire that I talked about that'll let you know how your nervous system works. Take it for you, take it for your kids. It's totally free as many times as you want for all the humans around you.
Alyssa, thank you.
Thank you for having me.